Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blind Buys, a brand new podcast where we watch and discuss movies we've bought sight unseen. I'm Jesse, and with me, as always, is my collector in crime, Josh.
Hey, thanks for joining us for our fourth episode, where we'll be discussing Jesse's blind buy pick, The Wiz. We're recording a bit early for this episode, so as we're recording this, the Super Bowl has just happened, and I believe the Seattle Seahawks won the game. Jesse, did you watch the game? Did y'all celebrate up where you're at?
Yes, I'm in the greater Seattle area, so we did watch. I'm not a huge football fan, but it's hard to avoid the fever when the Seahawks are in it, and we did watch. And so it was a fun time. I was in and out. I was doing a lot of cooking, making stuff for tacos. I caught some of Bad Bunny's performance. I got to go back and watch the rest. It was pretty amazing from what I heard and just the things that I saw. I know there's at least one thing that you and I both watched. I haven't logged it yet, but I saw your review for There Goes the Neighborhood.
Yes.
The Catherine O'Hara vehicle, also starring Jeff Daniels from the 90s.
We talked a little bit about this last week when we were discussing our Catherine O'Hara films we'd watched, and I really wish it was better. The cast is awesome, and the logline that we had read on Letterboxd, I was fully in. I thought this was going to be like really in my like sweet spot of comedies from this era, and it didn't hit for me. I don't know if it had to do more with like the filmmaking being all over the place, and like there were plot holes that really like rubbed me the wrong way. I thought Catherine O'Hara was great though. Like she's actually doing more dramatic work than I was expecting.
It's pretty straight what she's doing. Yeah, I felt like, there's a reason why I have not heard of this movie before, why it sort of lost to time. It does feel, I know you're a big fan of The Burbs. It does sort of feel like The Burbs light in some ways. Mm-hmm. Because it does have that, and what I enjoyed the most about it was that yuppie people sort of caught up in their boxes of wealth and comfort, and like looking out at through their windows to see what each other are doing. There's a lot of like sort of misunderstandings that happen between like Dabney Coleman is one of the neighbors and Rhea Perlman is another neighbor, and there's just a lot of misunderstandings and things that to me were very silly. And to see them, the actors who they had in this movie, sort of going at it together was enough for me. Like it was, it's not something I'll probably ever revisit, but I'm happy to have watched it. Harris Yulin, who is a face that you'll recognize as the judge from Ghostbusters 2, among other things. He was just one of that guys from the era. He is just totally nuts as this convict in the movie. And Jonathan Banks is another convict from later from Breaking Bad, being very, very funny, doing very, very funny stuff in this movie. Mm-hmm. So just getting a chance to see all these people kind of play with each other was fun. But the last half hour really goes off the rails in some unexpected ways. I didn't see the way it all sort of came together in a very kind of madcap way. But it was great to check another Catherine O'Hara vehicle off the list for sure.
Yeah, and I always do like seeing Rhea Perlman pop up in things outside of Cheers, so seeing her outside of that role is always fun. And I did appreciate some of the stuff that they were doing at the beginning, kind of setting up the neighborhood and where everyone was in which houses and how everyone was kind of interacting, snooping at each other, and like that kind of thing. I did enjoy that. I think it was once the heist was happening in both houses, because the convicts get the house wrong, and then the Jeff Daniels character gets the right house where the treasure is. And I think once that mix-up started happening, I kind of started maybe I was just thinking too hard about it. Maybe I wanted it to make more sense to me, and I should have just kind of let it happen.
Sure. Well, and there's also stuff like there is a relationship develops between, or an attraction develops between Jeff Daniels and Catherine O'Hara, because it's the 90s and a comedy, and of course there has to be, but it kind of felt very like, I mean, nothing much is realistic about this movie, but I just found myself thinking like, oh, this feels weird that this is happening now. I guess they have great chemistry together. It's fun to watch them together, but there were times when I was like, oh, this is just kind of strange.
Yeah. Well, at least we can say we've seen it.
Yep.
If Kino Lorber happens to put out the 4K of this in the future, which feels like the most likely scenario if this was ever to get rediscovered, then I will happily talk about it on this show.
Yep, the Catherine O'Hara completists will get it. I also got to get out to the theater to see, probably on the last day that it would have been available to see here, The Testament of Anne Lee.
You're joining the Shaker movement.
Oh man, well, I don't think it's for me after learning more about what it's about, but it absolutely sold me on just the, taking you inside of somebody's headspace. In this case, Anne Lee, as played by Amanda Seyfried, just totally selling, this character, this person who went through just all sorts of awful things. I mean, things that happen to almost any woman who birthed children in the 18th century, basically. And the sort of violence that happens to the body, and then turning the body into this sort of vessel for exaltation, the things they do with dance and music. It was really amazing, really amazing. So I'm glad I got to see that in the theater, and I'm kind of baffled at its like complete shutout from award stuff. But I feel like this is one that people are gonna, when they come around to it, even if they get over sort of like the weird sell of like it's a musical, but it's also like this strange period piece. I just think it was really bold and really cool, and I'd love to see more movies take chances like the ones that this one did. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm dying to see this movie. I've been hearing people talk about it since it was in previews several months ago. And it just kind of where I'm at, like geographically, it's just not going to play around here.
Yep.
Most likely at all.
It's a real shame.
So I will definitely check it out when it hits VOD. I'm like slowly getting accustomed to the idea of renting things, like early, like when they first drop on digital, just because I know, like with the new baby and everything, I'm not going to be making it out into the theater for quite a long time. I'm kind of like hyping myself up to be like, it's $20 to rent something that I know I'm not going to be able to see for months. Is it worth it? I'm kind of working through that in my head right now, but Anne Lee is one that I think I would do for sure once it hits digital.
Did you catch anything else of note in the week since we last talked?
This isn't a movie, but I watched the new Muppet Show special twice in one day. I was a humongous fan of this version of it. For anyone listening that doesn't know, Seth Rogen executive produced a one-off reboot of The Muppet Show that aired on February 4th. Sabrina Carpenter was the special guest, and this is supposed to be like a backdoor pilot for a future season of The Muppet Show. Hopefully, fingers crossed, after all of the many, 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 many times that Disney has failed to do literally anything with the Muppets since they've owned it for going on 20 years or so now. This has been like the biggest and clearest sign to me that they're like finally ready to get back into what made the Muppets work in the first place. So this was just a 30-minute special. Had a lot of great bits from the original show, but nothing too nostalgia heavy. Some interesting musical swings that I really enjoyed. And overall, it just felt like, just like another episode of The Muppet Show. They weren't trying to reinvent things too much, and I really appreciated that. I don't know where you stand on the Muppets, but this took up a good chunk of my headspace this week.
I mean, I love the Muppets. I grew up watching the movies, certainly, and I've seen not too much of the original show, to be honest with you. I wish I've to have seen more. But yeah, I love the Muppets. I haven't really engaged with anything since Muppet Treasure Island, I think. I don't think I even saw the first, the thing whatever Jason Segel did. I didn't do that. I looked at it and I didn't really feel like much of anything to me.
Yeah.
So okay. Yeah, I kind of like them existing in this sort of like show business world, I guess, that they really the first, obviously the show and then the first few movies kind of did. So yeah, but I want to check it out. Some other friends of ours have raved about it, so I gotta see what's going on.
Yeah,
and maybe there'll be more.
Yeah, I really hope so. When I was a kid and still in church, our youth group went on a trip to Florida for like a church choir thing. And we got to spend a day at Disney World. And my parents had sent me with, a certain amount of money for like food and maybe like a t-shirt or something. And I ended up buying a couple of seasons of The Muppet Show on DVD and spent my entire allotment of money for the week on those 2 DVD sets.
Amazing.
I did watch the rentals from Scarecrow that I discussed last week. I got 4 films from Scarecrow. First up was the movie Debs, a 2005 film by Angela Robinson. I put in my review that it's easily the most 2005 movie I've ever seen, and that applies to the costumes, the acting style, the cinematography, the set design, the music choices, literally everything in this movie feels directly tied to that era. It was so much fun. I had a blast with this movie. It's so campy. It's got a queer love story that is actually like super sweet. It's not like a token love story. It feels very genuine, and that feels surprising for the time period as well. And I just thought it was a great example of independent filmmaking, because this started as a comic that the director was writing just in her spare time, then moved into a short film that she made, and then ended up getting some funding for this feature film. And so it was just a really good time. The next one I watched was David Cronenberg's Shivers. I had a great time with this one too. It's very straightforward, which I wasn't prepared for, having seen a lot of Cronenberg's later works and kind of how like heady and kind of inscrutable they are. But it feels kind of like a thesis statement for his entire like thing, his whole project. So yeah. That was a good one. The category actually for the challenge that I watched this for was a recommendation from Charlie XCX, a noted Cronenberg fan. So she's recommended this just in the media in the past. So that was fun. And then I watched 1979's Phantasm, which I did not vibe with at all, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
It probably did have more to do with me being completely sleep deprived at the time and watching it. I think like falling asleep and then realizing that I was asleep and then rewinding to catch up with what I had missed. And then by the time I got to the end of the movie, I think it had been like 4 hours and I was just kind of done with it.
Yes. Many experiences like that for me now these days, and in your future too. I'm sorry to say, but yes.
Yeah.
Well, maybe give it another shot in October. Maybe in a watch party of some kind, but yeah, I get it.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know if I would just like wasn't clicking with like the lore or like whatever was going on. I don't know. I definitely need to go back and do that again. But I was gonna say though, they took the Gom Jabbar thing straight out of Dune. Like there was a scene in the film where someone has to put their hand in the box of pain or whatever, but of course the pain isn't real, and I was like, that's directly out of Dune. The last Scarecrow rental I watched was a 1992 film called Cuffs, starring Christian Slater. This is a movie about, you know, typical kind of asshole screw-up character that Christian Slater would play, whose brother is like a patrol special for a district, which is kind of like you own a district and you're like the private security detective, like first call, instead of calling the police, you'd call them, I guess, sort of thing, to kind of alleviate pressure on the police force. I don't know anything about this kind of procedure. I don't know if this is a thing that happens in cities. I'm not sure. But anyway, his brother, who is a patrol special, passes away, leaves him his district, and so now he's forced to get his act together and become a patrol special on his own and also get revenge on the people who killed his brother. So pretty interesting film, had never heard of before, and Christian Slater's charisma is just like off the charts. So that's pretty much my big takeaway, is that of course he can carry a movie because he's just so charismatic. Probably will never watch it again though. Yeah, that's pretty much all I've watched over the last week. Anything else you've caught up on besides those?
Exit Wounds with Steven Seagal. Probably one of the last better things he did, if you have stomach for his movies. But this one had, you know, DMX, Michael Jai White. I think I wanted to, after watching Black Dynamite, I felt like I needed to see some more Michael Jai White, and he's in this. Not enough of him, but there's a lot of really rad explosions and stuff. So I had fun with Exit Wounds. I don't do a deep dive on the Seagal stuff, but not too much else.
Should we pivot into some of the upcoming physical media releases we've got listed here? We've got some Radiance announcements, their May slate of films. 5 films here, all films that I've never heard of before, as tends to happen with Radiance's releases. First up, we've got The Professional from 1981, directed by Georges Lautner and starring Jean-Paul Belmondo. Most notable for having an Ennio Morricone score, which I'm kind of interested in. Aesthetics of a Bullet, a 1973 film directed by Sadao Nagajima, the director of the Japanese Godfather trilogy. This one's noted as predating Taxi Driver, which, you know, basically tells you everything you need to know about this film, I would imagine.
It has an amazing title, Aesthetics of a Bullet.
Yeah.
I love that.
Truly. Next up, we've got Jeanne La Pucelle, a 1994 two-part Joan of Arc epic, directed by Jacques Rivette and starring Sandrine Bonnaire. Again, never heard of it. And then we've got a 4K of the 1970 Brian De Palma film Hi Mom, starring Robert De Niro, noted as a vital work of early New Hollywood. And then from their partner label Chasm Films, this is a 2006 film, Taxidermia, a Hungarian body horror black comedy film. So, any thoughts on these releases?
Yeah, I would definitely. I mean, the De Palma one sticks out just because that's, sort of like comforting warm bath stuff. De Niro, De Palma, like pre Godfather De Niro. So I'm at least curious about that, of course. But these other ones, I'm always down to at least watch a Radiance release for sure, because I sort of have some iterations of some of these sort of veins that Radiance mines, where they go deep, digging deep into like the Yakuza films and the French crime films. I have enough of a stack of each of those from them already that it's hard for me to say I'm gonna go in and get more until I watch some more of these. But Jacques Rivette's awesome. I would definitely watch that, and especially if it's a Joan of Arc story. I'm very intrigued by that for sure. I mean, this Jean-Paul Belmondo's chewing on a cigarette and is holding a massive pistol on the cover of this one, and then in the back he's got like an M16. I mean, yeah, this looks fantastic. Le Professionnel. Let's check it out.
Simple pleasures, but
Yep. They know how to sell. Taxidermia I would have to watch. I don't know if I would want to watch this again, but still great that they're helping get that movie out there. Always down to see what Radiance digs up. And I did pick up a couple at the Barnes and Noble thing that's going on also.
Yeah, what did you get?
I got the second volume in the Shinobi set of sort of ninja movies. What else did I get? Oh, I got that the three movies by Robert Hossein.
Yeah, this has been on my to-get list for a long time.
I pulled the trigger on that since it was half off. So yeah, Wicked Games, 3 films by Robert Hossein, who most people may know him. Well, maybe not know him, but may have seen him in Rafifi. He was in the French heist film Rafifi. But it's a set of just these 3 different genre movies that he directed. Kind of 3 different movies, and they each are kind of in a vein of sort of exploitation or genre movie that I'm really curious about. And if nothing else, they look like they're beautifully photographed in black and white, and Radiance always does an amazing job of like displaying the qualities that are inherent in those formats. So I'm excited to check it out. I figured if with the deal that was on at Barnes & Noble, it was worth taking a chance on those. So that's the one I'm most excited about for sure.
Yeah, I only picked up one during that sale. It's Illustrious Corpses, the Francesco Rossi film. Really excited to check that one out. I love Radiance's packaging. I love the booklets they include with so many of their films. And they treat some of these films that you would never expect to get like the full 5-star treatment with such like care and obvious affection for the work. And then they go out and find people to write essays, like often new essays, or they find archival written works to compile into these booklets. And so you're not just getting, the film and some special features. You're getting something that's been purposefully like handpicked to go specifically with the experience of the film. So we've got a couple of other announcements that came in from the Warner Archive collection just yesterday, I think, based on when we were recording. These are titles coming out in March. We've got 1940's It All Came True, starring Humphrey Bogart and Ann Sheridan. We've got 1941's Honky Tonk, starring Clark Gable and Lana Turner. Turned on my full Texas accent for that one. Honky Tonk. Oh, geez. We've got 1934's The Gay Divorcee, starring Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. We've got 1956's Tea and Sympathy, starring Deborah and John Kerr. And The Man Who Came to Dinner from 1942, starring Betty Davis and Ann Sheridan. And then a couple of animated releases. We've got Scooby-Doo's All-Star Laugh Olympics, a 1970s series. This is collecting all 24 episodes of that show. And then Looney Tunes Collector's Vault Volume 2, which compiles more shorts that have never been released on home video or have never been remastered in HD. So this is a great slate for March. So I will be getting several of these, We've discussed Warner Archive in the past on this show and how pristine their transfers are. You know, they're not always the most feature heavy releases, but they always typically look great. And it's always, you know, classic studio films that have just not gotten the Blu-ray treatment. So in this case, like The Gay Divorcee, I'll definitely be grabbing that one. That's a classic that you hear film people talk about all the time. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
definitely
think
interested
that
in
might
that
have been
one.
their first team up, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. So that's certainly notable. Actually, maybe the Laugh Olympics might be the one that I'm the most interested in. I've been trying to get the Warner Archive put out the Wacky Races. There's a set of the full Wacky Races,
Yeah.
which is always, it's never available at Diabolic or Orbit. I guess I might have to go elsewhere to find it. But I love those shows. And I Laugh Olympics is basically kind of the same thing, just a different framing device, I guess. But I enjoy watching those with my son. I have a bunch of Looney Tunes back when they were doing the Golden Collection DVDs back in like the early 2000s. I have like the first 3 of those and 1 or 2 of the, maybe not the Collector's Vault, but they have Warner Archives doing another Looney Tunes line, and I have 2 of those.
It's
so
the collector's choice. Yeah.
yes, so that's I have the first 2 of those. So it would be nice to get all those eventually, to really see the, you know, animation cleaned up, and so you can just really appreciate, like, you know, the lines and the colors and all that stuff.
Yeah. They're
So
fantastic. The Looney Tunes releases from Warner Archive. They released the Collector's Choice 4-volume set, which is, I think, like 200 shorts. And I've got all of those. I did get volume 1 of the Collector's Vault. I've gotten their Tom and Jerry Golden Era Blu-ray. I do have the Wacky Races Blu-ray. In fact, we had it on earlier this week just while we were feeding the baby, just to have it on in the background. So yeah, they do a really great job restoring these old animated shorts and episodes.
and they're going deep on like Hanna-Barbera series that I've never even heard of. So it's really cool that some of these will get out before whatever might happen with Warner Archive happens. At least these things are getting rescued, and we'll get some good releases. So I think that's great.
Yeah, I've been wanting to kind of collect as much of, you know, these older cartoons that I can get, because I'm trying, just thinking of, like, you know, having a new kid and seeing kind of what children's media is today, and even how it differs from, you know, what I used to watch, which, you know, relatively speaking wasn't that long ago, but I feel like things have changed a lot. Kind of wanting slower paced things, you know, hand-drawn things with lots of color, that kind of thing. Obviously, we're going to have to use some discretion with, you know, showing certain Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry episodes to our daughter at some point, just because they haven't always aged super well. But I'm kind of looking forward to getting to share those with her in the future, because they were important to me growing up, and I'm really hoping to pass that along. And speaking of, this is kind of off topic, but something that I've done over the last week is kind of evaluate the movies that I have on my shelf that I don't necessarily want to introduce my daughter to, like at any point, and maybe sectioning those off so they're not as easily available. Not like, we talked about this on our intro episode. A big reason for collecting is so that you can have the shelf, the wall of movies, you know, have your kids pick the movies that they want to watch, the ones that you want them to discover. It is a great tool for discovery. But when you have films like, you know, The Killer Condom on your shelf next to like The Incredibles or whatever, you know, like, it's just not something I want to deal with kind of at any point. So over the last week, I did section off a lot of those and put them kind of like in a drawer under our TV cabinet. A lot of those, like, Severin films or Vinegar Syndrome films that I'm like, I don't want to be the one responsible for my kid accidentally discovering these at some point because of me, you know?
When they find them in a box under the bed, then you're just creating an air of mystery.
That's true.
But no, but I hear you. No, you're right.
Yeah,
You're right.
do I want to do that?
I mean, everything, all of my stuff is already in boxes and bins, so I haven't had to deal with this yet. I have, you know, a very small selection of like mostly box sets that are out. But I don't know. I think almost everything, almost a Killer Condom, yeah, because I mean, even the artwork on Killer Condom is like too much for me I don't want to have to explain what's going on there. To
exactly.
An 8 or even 12-year-old perhaps. But I don't know. Then when you watch The Killer Condom, you realize it's actually like kind of like a deeply profound political work. So,
Yes, exactly. It's an essential
yeah.
it's an essential piece of queer cinema,
Yep.
and as crazy as that film sounds based on the log line and the cover art, it is really great. The last thing that I wanted to note on new releases is that A24 announced the Marty Supreme 4K and Blu-ray being put up for pre-order just the other day. I've already got my pre-order in for the 4K. I'm trying to figure out with A24, like the reason why some of their in-house releases only get Blu-rays instead of 4Ks. Marty Supreme gets a 4K. I Saw the TV Glow only gets a Blu-ray. I'm just trying to figure out the reasoning.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it has to do with how they were shot, if they think the Blu-ray is going to be good enough for some of them, or if it's some kind of a rights thing. Maybe somebody else is going to they're going to give somebody else rights to the 4K. I don't know. I don't know.
Oh,
Or
that's a good
just
point.
it could also have to do with how popular the movie was like in release, because 4K is more expensive.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
if they don't know if people, especially for what the prices that they charge on in their store are just kind of pretty premium, considering what they put on these discs, which is really generally not that much. A lot of these discs are coming like within a year of the movies being produced. There's really not all that much in the way of features on them. Sometimes, I mean, this one does have a commentary, so that's good, because I mean the Safdies are big physical media people, so I think they would love to do a commentary for anything. This actually has an okay amount of stuff on it, so I'll probably get this eventually, because I loved Marty Supreme. What I miss is I'm a sucker for their fabric slipcase really primo releases, and
Yeah,
I checked, it's been like almost 2 years since they put one of those out, and the last one
really.
was Stop Making Sense, and
Hmm.
that was like May 2024 or something like that when that came out, which is pretty wild. So I kind of wonder how they reached the choice to put those out or not. Well, like what determines what gets one of those? I mean, they've only done like 6 or 7 releases like that. So maybe it's just become too expensive for them to make them, and I mean those are even more expensive
Yeah,
than these releases are. But
they're really.
I'm always curious which one's going to be the next one to get the fabric slipcase. And I know they're kind of oversized, so they're annoying, but they just feel so nice and they look so good. And they've got like these bound books inside that are like sewn. They're like sewn into the binding. They're just beautiful. They're beautiful things, and they do a good job producing them. So.
Yeah, it's similar to how Cinematograph does their limited editions with kind of
Yep.
like the book binding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The media book format. Yep.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I really enjoy those. I think I have Everything Everywhere All at Once, Stop Making Sense, and The Green Knight.
Yeah, and the illustrations in the Green Knight are beautiful. So
Oh yeah.
you really do feel like you're getting something for your money with those, I feel like.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that is on more of a display like in my shelving system than the other ones because it's just so beautiful. But you're right, it's oversized, so it's a little funky trying to get it to fit with everything else. Yeah.
Shall we jump into the whiz?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. In 1978, Motown Productions, which was the film and television production arm of Berry Gordy's Motown Records, they produced and released a film adaptation of The Wiz, a hit Broadway play from 1974 that won 7 Tony Awards, including Best Musical. This reimagining of The Wizard of Oz, with an all-black cast retold through the lens of the black experience in America, was groundbreaking on its own, and Motown's production would push things even further. Their version's Dorothy would be a kindergarten teacher trying to find her place in Harlem, played by a then 33-year-old Diana Ross. With 3 generations of superstars from the world of black music, renowned director Sidney Lumet at the helm, and the decision to shoot largely on location in New York City, what could go wrong? The Wiz.
All
And I
right.
think almost everything in this movie goes right. I'll just tip my hand at the front.
Okay.
I think it's mostly a case of people getting it wrong, like the reception and the popular imagination at the time. But yeah, what is your history with The Wizard of Oz generally? The Wiz in particular, because you hadn't seen this but yet either, had you?
No, I had only seen maybe like 20 or 30 minutes of this. I do remember very distinctly a substitute teacher put this on in one of my 6th grade classes at some point, and I think I had seen everything up to the first Ease on Down the Road, but I definitely
Okay.
wasn't paying as much attention as I should have at the time. But yeah, history with The Wizard of Oz, The Wiz. I'll be honest, I'm pretty Ozed out at this point with Wicked, Fever, sweeping the nation for the last 2 years, and not loving those films as much as other people. I kind of found myself getting a little impatient with this version of The Wiz, but in the moment I was like, I know this doesn't have anything to do with like the filmmaking or the performances or anything like that. This is more of a personal thing for me of just like, this is the 5th time this year I've seen this story play out, and I'm kind of ready for it to be over. But that's not to say that The Wizard of Oz is not a story that I love. It's not to say that this version of The Wiz isn't a good adaptation, because it's a very interesting one, and I found a lot to like in it. This version of The Wiz is quite different from even the stage version, or the one that I actually had the most familiarity with, which was the live version that NBC did about a decade or so ago.
Okay.
That was my first real exposure to The Wiz, the musical. Yeah, so The Wiz Live was on NBC in December of 2015. This starred Shanice Williams as Dorothy, Elijah Kelly as the Scarecrow, Neo as the Tin Man, David Allen Greer as the Cowardly Lion, Mary J. Blige as Eveline, and Queen Latifah as the Wiz. And it was at the time where NBC was still trying to figure things out with their live TV programs, and so there was a lot of dead air during this special. They made a lot of updates to like the time period, I guess. Like there was one scene that's kind of become infamous of like when Dorothy first comes into Oz, like someone's carrying an iPad and is like doing some shit on the iPad. Like, I don't know. But they updated the music to have more of a modern like hip hop sound. And so I really, really liked the soundtrack from this version. I had it on repeat for like a whole year after this special. And so that is like the main exposure I had to The Wiz before this.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't caught any of those. And I've never seen a live version of The Wiz either. This is the only version of it that I've seen. And I had also seen clips of it for sure. Snippets of it on the Disney Channel, I believe, when I was a kid. But I found this to just be, I mean, on the Criterion 4K is like was completely revelatory for me. Did you have the disc? Did you watch the disc?
Yes, I watched on the Criterion 4K as well.
Nice, because it's a ridiculously skimpy release in terms of the features, which was a disappointment. But one of the things that was on there was a program they ran on TV from the premiere, and you see a snippet of the Emerald City dance that they broadcast on TV, and it looks like mud. You even heard people complain like, oh, there's a complaint that a lot of it's kind of dark. Some of that's true because of where and how they filmed it, but with what Criterion did for this release, I mean, it's just the sets and the locations where the things that they did to transform portions of New York, I just found to be mind-boggling. And the colors, especially in that Emerald City sequence, were just so great. And the costumes are all amazing. Lots of details, certainly on the main characters, but even just all these little things like there's like a camera. There's like a person who's almost like a gonk droid from Star Wars, but they're a camera walking around. In that Emerald City sequence, there's a person, and this was a great gag. They said, "Hey, Mike," and a huge microphone walks over. That really made me laugh.
Yeah.
But just lots of really amazingly inventive things. And, this was like Stan Winston did the makeup and the sort of special effects makeup design for this. And this was like, I mean, it's kind of his first big gig, and it's really amazing stuff. And oddly enough, kind of like, especially with the Tin Man, kind of like a warm up for when he would do Heart Beeps a few years later, a notorious movie that that garnered his first Oscar nomination. But yeah, I mean, I just thought the movie looks great, and I don't know, I just felt like it kept throwing visually inventive things on the screen that kept me fully engaged. Certainly once they were in Oz, and just also like the way it was shot was also very striking to me. Like I think Sidney Lumet was maybe sort of a strange choice at the time, and he wasn't the first pick to direct this, I guess. I felt like some of the choices he made were really interesting. It certainly doesn't look like any other musical that I've seen, just with some of the way that he shot some of like there's some dance sequences in here where there are like 100 dancers on screen, like the Emerald City sequence, which they shot at the in the World Trade Center Plaza, which is just another thing that they like sort of cast in this green and then red and gold light. I mean, that's just totally lost to time. I mean, you can't do that anymore. It's gone.
Right.
But they make these locations in New York City feel completely otherworldly, which I thought, I mean, on its own was a really tremendous achievement.
Yeah, his Sidney Lumet's directing style in this, it's like a middle ground between like how classic movie musicals used to be made and how like modern movie musicals are made now. So it's like the songs aren't all done in one shot like a classical Hollywood musical might be, or these big long takes where Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers are tap dancing and it's a whole choreographed sequence all in one take. But it's not also very choppy, very close up focused. There's a nice middle ground between, like you said, capturing these hundreds of dancers in these extremely wide shots so that you can see everything going on.
Yeah. But
But
they
he's
shot
also
it with
not
like a
afraid
long
to.
lens. It was like a
Yeah.
long lens
Hmm.
shot from far away. So you get this really
Yeah.
amazing extreme depth of field where you see all of these people dancing. You can see what they're all doing,
Yeah.
which normally you'd think more like a wide lens, but that's not what
Hmm.
he did like repeatedly in this. And it was just something that really stood out to me, and maybe, more traditional musical director wouldn't have done. But yeah.
Yeah, and he doesn't cut very much during the dance sequences either. Like it's like I said, it's not all one take, but it's like he's choosing the shots that he thinks will best like showcase what's going on during the number. And I think that's especially noticeable in the Munchkinland sequence. I don't even know if it's called Munchkinland in this film, but once the Munchkins like come off the wall because they've been cursed to be graffiti, and then they do their whole dance with Miss One. I thought that one was a lot of fun, and that's the one to me that kind of encapsulates what his directing style was going to be like moving forward for the film, how he was going to handle all the dancers, all the music, the timing, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that one shot in the World's Fair grounds, the 1964 World's Fair grounds. So just from the jump, as soon as you're in Oz, he starts taking these places that would have been familiar to certainly people from New York, but even to anyone who had watched a lot of movies, and just kind of like, because I think there was a quote from him. There was one feature with an archival interview with Lumet. It was a feature he did on Quincy Jones because he worked with him a lot. He was like, I guess, the first person to hire him to do a film score, The Pawnbroker. But he said reality could be the most fantastic thing of all. And that was sort of what motivated the choice for them to shoot on location. And I guess he said he wanted to do more location stuff, but that it didn't work out, and they ended up doing some stuff in sets. But I think what they did with the World Trade Center and using the Cyclone, the roller coaster on Coney Island, which has
That was so cool.
Yeah, which has like the yellow brick road built into the track and stuff. I'm a real sucker. I grew up in like up the Hudson River from New York City, but went down there all the time and went to college there. So I'm just a total sucker for anything showing me old New York. And this was sort of that, but with this layer of surreality sort of pasted on top of it. So it totally worked for me. And I also thought that the story itself is sort of a very, very straightforward Wizard of Oz sort of thing, but with the twist, the setup is with Dorothy is notably, rather than being, and I think this is something they sort of took flack for at the time, that she wasn't a kid, and she wasn't even a visibly young woman, even though, I mean, Diana Ross was 33. She's not, she was still pretty young, but she's a kindergarten teacher who, rather than kind of like having this like yearning to go someplace else, it's kind of almost inverted. Like she's kind of afraid of what might be waiting out there for her. Like she's never left Harlem, they say, basically.
Yeah, what is it? She's never been south
of 125th Street. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's more like she doesn't really know how she fits in the sort of expectations of being like, a young woman, a young black woman in New York, and if she like went out and took some more chances. So it sort of like ends up being this journey to discover more about herself. And yeah, I thought it was also noteworthy the way that it sort of takes this, for what at the time would have been this really, I think, powerful kind of like black empowerment message. And they work in a lot of stuff with just some of the imagery. Like when we first see Michael Jackson, who plays the Scarecrow, and he's sort of like, he's stuck up on a pole and he's surrounded by these crows, these guys in these crow costumes, and Dorothy has to chase them away, and she's chasing away this, like, these Jim Crow, essentially. I mean, it's sort of very, it's sort of heavy-handed, but for me it works for the type of story it was.
Yeah, it's very fantastical, like when you're seeing it on screen, but it gets the message across so clearly that it just like it clicks automatically. And that song that Michael Jackson sings during that section, "You Can't Win," was actually written for this movie because the Scarecrow sings a different song in the stage version. But it's the lyrics of "You Can't Win," if you listen to it, go along so well with that idea of the crows kind of standing in for Jim Crow.
Yeah, and the fact that it centers, a black woman who is the person who has to be sort of this rock for these three, and I guess if you count the Wiz, four black men who kind of feel like they can't figure out how to get themselves out of this rut. I mean, it's it's still kind of a very powerful and timely and important thing to say, like, these women are the rocks of their community. So in a way, it's kind of not surprising that at the time people kind of didn't, I should say probably white commentators didn't really get it, and it didn't click for them. It's because they didn't see how important this was. So it kind of isn't surprising at all that it was sort of panned, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it might, if it's okay with you, it might help to put some context around this whole thing and kind of see where some of the main stars in this film kind of were in their careers around the time that this film was made. Because I did a little research, just cursory research, like what was going on for Diana Ross in the 70s, what caused her to end up starring in this film in the first place. So Diana Ross left the Supremes in 1970, and between 1972 and 1980, she had 4 top 10 albums. In 1972, she was the first black actress to receive an Oscar nomination for a debut performance. She played Billie Holiday in the movie Lady Sings the Blues. So basically, the world's biggest pop star. She'd had the most auspicious start to her acting career that someone could possibly have, getting nominated for her first performance. In 1976, Billboard called her the female entertainer of the century, which feels very hyperbolic, but it is Diana Ross. Like, we just have to.
Yeah.
I mean, she is who she is. And there's a reason why her name is such a big deal even today. However, in 1977 and 1978, she released 2 albums that had no lead singles on them. So I think she was kind of in a bit of a down period. And so when Motown acquired the rights to The Wiz and the producer, Rob Cohen, couldn't get any studio interest for the film with like the original stage stars attached, I think Ross kind of took it upon herself to try to work herself into the film. And so she convinced the producer, Rob Cohen, to cast her in the movie. And then with her as part of the package, that's when Universal agreed to finance the film. And so that's kind of the road that she went on to get to this production. And unfortunately, because the film ended up being, at the time, both a critical and a commercial failure, that basically ended her acting career. She did just fine afterwards. Obviously, she kept putting out albums. I think she had another top 10 album in the year after The Wiz. But it's kind of tough to see that the reaction to this film did impact her at least her acting career so heavily. But beyond Diana Ross in the 70s, this is Michael Jackson's feature debut as well in a film, and might be one of the only lead roles that he has in a feature. In the 70s, he was still with the Jackson 5. They had left Motown in 1975. He was the group's main songwriter during this whole period. But in 1977, he moved to New York to be in The Wiz. And on the set of The Wiz, he met Quincy Jones, and Quincy Jones ended up producing 3 albums for Michael Jackson in the future. Without Michael Jackson being in this film, who knows what kind of music we would have gotten from him afterwards. And the only other person I did some cursory research on for what was going on in the 70s for was Richard Pryor, who played the Wiz in this film. In the 70s, he had been a writer for Sanford and Sons. He had starred in 10 or more films at least, kind of lost count, including Blazing Saddles in 1974, which, of course, is a classic now. 1975, he was a host in the first season of SNL. That kind of got him his own variety show, The Richard Pryor Show. Only aired for 4 episodes, though, and that was canceled. He put out a variety of comedy albums during this time. So they were able to amass, a group of stars during this period who were very, very well known, but who definitely needed this kind of boost in their career to be in something as high profile and high budget as this.
Well, and it also does smack of the thing that I think we know to be true of, like, if the establishment gives a group of, you know, black creatives, they take a big chance and it fails, them saying, well, see what happened, we took a chance and it didn't work out. But I think, you know, white directors are often given many chances to fail, and the powers that be just are sort of less likely to take chances again if they feel like a project like this doesn't work out for black audiences. And it's a real shame, because I think it really landed for those folks and continues to.
Yeah, which is why it's become, you know, a cult classic at this point. But yeah, I mean, how many more movies did Sidney Lumet go on to direct after this one failed?
He continued to work regularly, but if you look at it, casual people who aren't big Lumet heads might say that, you know, there's a very good chance you haven't heard, like, casual movie fans, aside from maybe The Verdict, which he would do a few years later, like, all of his big movies came before this, like Dog Day Afternoon, Network, Serpico, The Pawnbroker, stuff like that. But he continued to make great movies for a long time, but I feel like nothing else kind of hit the way that his 70s movies did. But I also think this is just another great example of him, an example of how he could really do anything. Like, if you look at even something like Death Trap that he would do a few years later, it's this sort of like madcap murder mystery comedy of sorts. Not a murder mystery exactly, but yeah, he was just so versatile. And I don't know if you'd get another budget quite as big as this for the rest of his career.
I'm curious to know your thoughts on the music in this film. Have you heard any of these songs before?
Brand New Day and Ease on Down the Road, I definitely were familiar to me, and I think really hit. Still, like, those are the ones that will stick with me. They're well written in terms of, like, delivering on the themes of believing in yourself, and how that is going to be the thing that lifts you up and gets you out and gets you through. I mean, certainly when you, and, you know, they I don't think we've mentioned Lena Horne's name yet, but when she is rolled out as the Good Witch of the South at the end, I mean, just awesome and incredible, the way that she's wearing this incredible blue gown and is surrounded by black babies who are, like, suspended in air and also wearing these blue gowns. It's just this very striking, dreamy image of, like, you know, like, yeah, this is our future, like, that she's surrounded by, and this is the sort of the powerful message that's going to, you know, deliver the community. So yeah, I thought the music was fun, and it's just incredibly, I mean, it's basically all Motown productions, which is, I mean, what America was listening to in, you know, the 1970s. The Emerald, and again, the Emerald City sequence is maybe the most striking thing to me on a variety of dimensions, just from how it looked, but also, like, the costuming and the sort of, there's, like, they throw in, like, it's sort of like this interesting pan black experience medley. There's like some disco, there's like some samba at the beginning. So they're kind of throwing a lot of different types of music at you also. And, you know, it's all orchestrated. I think Quincy Jones did all the orchestrations or something like that, or many of them. So I mean, it's just, you can't really ask for better talent behind the music.
That Emerald City sequence, the song itself, kind of about, like, the fickle nature of fads and fashion, and, you know, giving up what you own to have the latest fashions, and then it changes on a whim. I think that's such an interesting message, and it kind of, that doesn't get touched on really at all in any of the other Wizard of Oz adaptations. I mean, Oz is always shown as, you know, like the lavish kind of metropolis, and everyone's wearing outrageous things and all of that. But this is the only time that Oz is really shown as, like, a very materialistic place, in my opinion, and you know, everyone's chasing the latest fashion and conformity and all of that, until Dorothy arrives and kind of breaks everything up.
It also just is an opportunity to revel in these dancers who all look incredible, and it's just a display of a type of black excellence that I think would have been really appealing for the community at the time. And then you also get toward the end, you know, during the Brand New Day sequence, once the Eveline has been defeated, and all the dancers in this sort of sweatshop that she runs have been wearing these really incredible costumes, like with these masks that have, like, zippers on them. And then they unzip the masks and they sort of peel these costumes off, and it's just like this sort of very tasteful and not to me in any way exploitative celebration of like black bodies moving, and it becomes just this really joyful expression of music and dance.
Yeah, and having freedom in your own skin.
Absolutely. So that was, I mean, I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, that whole sequence is also really tightly choreographed too, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
it's very joyful to watch. And it actually made me kind of think about the Bad Bunny halftime show as I was watching this. I was just kind of thinking about, you know, in this period of history where joy and positivity and stuff like that are actually like tools of the resistance in a certain way.
Absolutely.
And
Yes,
I
yes.
felt that so much coming through Bad Bunny's halftime performance with all of the people he had dancing and how cinematic it was and how joyful everyone was and kind of in the face of everything that is happening and that we're facing and all of the opposition. And I felt the same kind of joy in the Brand New Day sequence, just coming off of the choreography and the dancers like in waves. That kind of essence of joy as resistance is really powerful throughout this film too.
And even just the way that by the end of the movie Dorothy is ready to go, she's ready to go home, but in the experience of helping these guys sort of find that they have it within themselves already to, you know, kind of, again, it's the Wizard of Oz thing. But I think when you have a cast of all black performers and it's just told through the lens of, you know, how hard life in the city is and all the obstacles that they have to face, she just seems really empowered to kind of go back and accept the calling that she already has to. The movie kind of ends very abruptly. She kind of goes back to Harlem and back into her house, but she seems to kind of have a new energy and vigor that suggests that she's going to figure it out. Whether that means like, you know, taking the job as a high school teacher or who knows what, but yeah.
I do wish that there was maybe a little bit more to the ending. That was one of the things that maybe bugged me a little bit. And also the fact that they kind of dispensed with the traditional like everyone in Oz that she meets is a reflection of someone in her family
Yes.
and
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of thing, which definitely like it does not have to happen in a version of The Wizard of Oz. So like I understand that they didn't do that here for whatever reason. But it did throw me off because I was definitely expecting it.
It runs over, it's over 2 hours already, so I wonder if they just felt like we gotta cut it. I also thought the little sort of frame, the opening scene in the apartment was really nice. Like the performer who plays her aunt is really great. It would have been nice to get a little something else with her at the end of sort of like a summation song that sort of tells us what direction she's going to take next.
I was trying to work out in my head like what the point of that sequence was, because they sing the family around the Thanksgiving table. Obviously, it's a very joyful Thanksgiving meal. You know, the whole family's there. There's a lot of joy in that. And Aunt M is singing the feeling that we had, not to Dorothy, but to her daughter. Dorothy's watching that song go on, and then she sings "Can I Go On," talking about like there is the fear of stepping outside her comfort zone and trying something new, but she also is singing about like not knowing that feeling that her aunt is singing about. So I'm kind of watching it, I was like, I don't know how much this makes sense. Like is she singing more about her fear of wanting to try something new, or is she singing about how she doesn't understand like the feeling of love that her family has? Because if that's the case, then that doesn't really she doesn't learn about that in Oz.
I took it as sort of, you know, she being, even if you just take it as she's, you know, not a 33 or like a 24, whatever I think she's supposed to be like in her early 20s, but as someone who already should be thinking about settling down, and there's sort of this juxtaposition of like Dorothy, you know, still living at home with her aunt while her aunt's I guess her cousin has settled down and has kids. So it's sort of this, well, what am I doing with myself? I haven't figured anything out. I've never left this like 10 block radius of where I live. I don't have like an especially prestigious job. So it sort of, to me at least, just underlined her feeling of feeling separate from what should be a happy place and a happy time, and not knowing how she fits in. And perhaps feeling like, you know, the teaching job is like a job that she has, but then I feel like the journey through Oz just sort of like underscores the importance of like what people like who are providing direction and grounding and words of encouragement to young people to aimless people to lost people, how important, like, we are the ones who are going to kind of lift ourselves out of this, and everything that you do to contribute to that is important.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good way to look at it.
Then we haven't even really talked much about, like, the lion and I enjoyed all three of the I thought all three of the guys who played the lion and the Scarecrow and the Tin Man were great, but these are very much like almost more like caricatures than characters. We're given a very basic like song about what they're about, what they're struggling with. Even Eveline is really only shows up at the very end. We sort of see her weird agent, who I should say, the scene in the subway with him, absolutely terrifying with the columns, another just incredibly inventive thing that would be pure nightmare fuel, and those like those toys on the springs. That like sort of inflated to these people in these crazy red costumes. Anyway, we get very little of the sort of like the Wicked Witch plot is very like it's super MacGuffin-y, like a thing that she just has to go do to get out of here.
Yeah,
we're not given much about why she's evil, other than she's like holding people in bondage, obviously, but it's not really concerned with being very, I guess, story driven in that way, which I was fine with because it was enough of a. It delivered on its themes, and it did it in a way that just kept me like wrapped in terms of what it was showing me and the displays and music and everything.
It was definitely odd to me that Eveline doesn't show up until almost like 90 minutes into the movie, especially because, in the original Wizard of Oz, the Wicked Witch is kind of around on the edges throughout, and her evilness is built up across the entire film just based on who Dorothy talks to. But yeah, that's a choice they made in this movie that is, it's not my favorite, but the Bad News song that Eveline sings in the film is my favorite song in the entire soundtrack.
Oh, wow. Nice.
It was my favorite one in the live version that we talked about earlier. It was my favorite production number in this film as well.
Mabel King as Eveline was just tremendous. I mean, the costuming and the makeup on her was very striking, and she just like really belts it with those numbers. But it's very much like they spray her with some water and she's gone, and that's like, well, that's that.
It might be more abrupt than in the original,
for sure. There's no indication as to why, how did they know that would happen? But again, it happens because we know it's the Wizard of Oz, and this is how the story ends. So we're all familiar with it. Were there any other little bits that we haven't hit on that you wanted to call out?
I am really glad you called out the subway chase scene, because the effects in that are just so cool. I could watch that scene alone multiple times. I thought that was fantastic. The snow tornado that draws Dorothy into Oz in the first place, kind of happening in the palm of Glinda's hand. Obviously, we don't know she's Glinda at the time, but it's Lena Horne like holding the snow tornado, and then it kind of zooms in and Dorothy's flying through. A very, very cool effect shot for the 70s. We didn't really talk about the Tin Man at all, but he's just a horny dude. I think I wish we had more time with him talking about like, my maker made me with such and such an irresistible attraction to the wrong women. That made me laugh so hard.
I wrote down that very line too. That made me laugh.
Yeah. A shot I really loved is a shot of all four of our main characters. I think it's all four of them. Right after they get the lion from the library, they dance on top of the taxis. And that's another one of those wide shots, filmed presumably with a long lens, it's kind of like playing with perspective a little bit. I really, really liked that shot.
Well, it's in front of this. I mean, I think this is one of the things that they did in the soundstage, but like that, like almost forced perspective diorama of the New York Public Library that they built. Just so, I love that. Like, and there's some matte paintings that they used, some composites that they did. It was weird. Lumet mentioned like, I didn't really know much about blue screen or shooting with blue screen, but maybe I should have done more of that. I was like, no, like what you did looks so cool.
Yeah.
And again, he sounded disappointed that he didn't do more on location, but I mean, what they managed to do is amazing, and something you would never see them do in New York, certainly not in New York City, or really, I don't think anywhere else. So.
Yeah. And then I had noted in this one that the Wiz feels like especially selfish, even for the Wizard of Oz. Like in other versions, he's definitely tricking everybody. But in this one, when they found him and they're giving them, their pleas and everything, he's like, what's in it for me? And I don't recall any other version of the wizard making it so explicit that he is like as self-serving as this one is. And then even to the point where he like once he's unmasked and doesn't know like what else to do. I mean, he's like a failed politician in this version and he just doesn't know how to get back home, and he asks Dorothy like, won't you do something for me? And Dorothy is like, I don't know what you have inside of you, but you're going to have to figure that out for yourself. It's like they're not letting him off the hook, which is kind of nice because in other versions, the wizard gets to fly off in the balloon and leave Oz with no consequences. It's pretty much it for my thoughts, though. Anything else you wanted to hit on for the film?
I think we hit most of mine. A little, there's the walk, instead of a walk, don't walk sign, it says don't ease and ease, as in ease on down the road. I just thought that was funny, and I wanted one. Oh, I want a sign for the back behind me here that says that. The Flying Monkey Motorcycle Club, those guys looked incredible. They're on real motorcycles, basically, but they're also wearing these crazy facial prosthetics, and like the motorcycles have these huge exhaust pipes. Really awesome stuff, more presumably from Stan Winston. Michael Jackson's seemingly this is a detail I don't think I would have noticed in anything other than the 4K on a nice TV. He has like his nose is like a peanut butter cup, a Reese's peanut butter cup wrapper is what it looks like. Is on his nose.
Yeah, I did notice that.
that just made me laugh, and then one of those things that if you're watching on, over rabbit ears on TV, you never would have seen, and maybe for the better, but it kind of, and also just like the way that I thought it was cool how he's stuffed with all these aphorisms and things. The Scarecrow is stuffed with all these, sayings and bits of knowledge that he pulls out, like quotes from William Shakespeare, and throughout the movie, he's always pulling these things out and reading them, and they're always sort of like applicable to the situation. But then at the end for him to like say something profound, and Dorothy says, "Oh, who's that from?" And he's saying, "That's from me." It's simple and maybe obvious, but it really hit. It really hit.
It's heartwarming.
And even the fact that and even before that, it's like, well, knowing the fact that you have all this knowledge inside of you is still notable and important, even if it's, So I just thought that was great. I thought that was great.
Yeah, I don't feel like we talked enough about Michael Jackson in this film. His singing is fantastic. Like he really gets to the heart of this character. Like you said, it is a caricature, like to some extent, because we don't get a lot of backstory.
He's the most well rounded out for sure.
Yes,
maybe
absolutely.
because we meet him first, and because they knew this was Michael Jackson. Even though, I mean, you can only imagine that if it had been like even just 5 years later, how much more they would have featured him probably. But yeah, I think he was it really worked, and I'm sure he was another big selling point for why this movie was able to get made in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's about it. The release itself, sadly, kind of bare bones. I like the essay from Aisha Harris. She's an NPR reporter. She's on their pop culture happy hour. Always enjoy everything she has to say, and I thought it was a lot of really heartfelt celebration of why this movie hits for the members of the Black community and why it was perhaps inevitably discounted in its time, given how it performed. So I'm glad to have that. And again, it's just, there's a commentary, which I didn't listen to, but it's, it's from it was recorded like last year by a couple of people. I'm sure there's some interesting stuff on it. I'd listen to the commentary if I watch this again. Do wish that Criterion put a little more into these releases, especially with how amazing the movie looks. Like all the artistry that went into making it. I want to know more about that. So maybe they talk about it in the commentary, but, and I agree, Stan Winston's dead, which is sad, but like, get me somebody to tell me about like these costumes and the sets and stuff. That would have been nice.
Yeah. Even if they like commission a new like visual essay or something, they do that a lot or at least on some of their older releases. Like this could have been a really features packed, like 5-star all out release, and instead we get an essay and 2 archival interviews that are like
the first one's
less
really
than 10
fluffy.
minutes long.
Yeah,
and not even completely pertaining to the Wiz itself. In fact, I'm like kind of surprised that they included the full extent of the archival interview with Diana Ross, which includes a contemporary film critic basically shitting on the film for like 5 minutes.
I thought it was useful because it just really sort of told you the depth, the extent to which this was like kind of like killed from the gate. So I felt like that was really illuminating. And I guess that guy, I looked into that guy because he said like it's lack of energy and focus. Like, are you lack of energy in this movie? Like,
Like, did you see
maybe
Brand New
they're,
Day? Like,
yeah,
yeah,
I
I don't
mean,
know.
so anyway, but I guess that guy had like, he actually may have directed one of the first sort of pro shot things for TV right around that time. So he sort of had a background in theater.
Okay.
But even so, it just felt like, yeah, this white guy
Yeah.
doesn't get it, doesn't want to see. I want to hear Diana Ross talk, and she talks for like 3 minutes.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with it being included, but I am sorely missing any kind of like counter to that
Absolutely. Yeah.
perspective in the features besides the essay. But yeah, the line that I took away from that was like, the sets and the costumes are great, but you don't go home whistling to the sets and costumes, which I'm like,
That
what
was
a...
such so lame. Yeah. So lame. But all that aside, I mean, it's still the restoration, the scan are incredible, and it's a movie that I would look forward to watching with my children. Absolutely. Like, we'll watch The Wizard of Oz, and shortly thereafter we'll watch this. So it's absolutely a keeper for me.
Yeah, yeah. This is a keeper for me too. I did ultimately have a good time with this. Oz fatigue aside, this is something that I'm looking forward to going back to in a couple of years when I don't have so much Oz on the brain.
So that wraps up our discussion of The Wiz, and this is when we look to see if there are any letters from listeners and friends, and we do have one voicemail from our friend Thom.
Yeah, let's check it out.
Hi both. I'm really enjoying Blind Buys, but I'm kind of out of the physical media game now. So every time I hear you say something like Arrow or Vinegar Syndrome or Kino, there's Deaf Crocodile in there, like, I just don't know what you're talking about. Are these studios or special companies that produce the videos, and is one better than the other? So yeah, can you give me a little explainer, please? Thanks.
A great question, since
Yeah,
there can
thanks, Thom.
be a lot of sort of inside baseball talk around labels and different types of releases. So yes, in most cases, we're talking about companies that are licensing these films from studios or whoever happens to hold the rights to release them. They're putting them on disc, and we call them boutique labels because they generally go above and beyond what a studio is doing for its releases, whether it's Warner Brothers or Paramount. Nowadays there's a disc comes out for, say Sinners a few weeks after it leaves theaters, put out by Warner Brothers or whatever. And some of those releases can be good, but I mean, I think as we've hit on in the past, with past episodes, things have sort of fallen off as the DVD era sort of has gone away, and the studios themselves don't see as much incentive to put a lot of work into releases. So these companies that cater more to collectors or see the value in licensing the movie and then putting releases out with special features that they themselves usually produce. So that's places like Arrow or Criterion, or like is the big one that most people know about. But then you've got some sort of like in between companies, like Warner Archive is actually part of Warner Brothers, but it's almost like this sort of carve out boutique shop that is doing really incredible restoration work on older movies that aren't really getting new releases from Warner Brothers proper because there's just not as big of a market for it. But they know that there are people out there who want to see these older movies presented in the most pristine way possible.
Yeah, when I was first getting into physical media more seriously, the way I would kind of think about it is like, the studio produced stuff is what you would like pick up off the shelf at Walmart or whatever. That's the kind of release that would get put out like for mass audiences. The boutique stuff, you kind of have to not necessarily search for as much, but you kind of have to know what you're looking for in some senses. It's not something that you would just be able to pick up off a shelf unless you were at like a dedicated video store or something like that. And I know a lot of that retail stuff has moved online in recent years. Like Target, Best Buy don't sell discs at all anymore. It is daunting though. There are a lot of boutique labels out there, and they all specialize in different things, but there does tend to be a lot of crossover, like especially between North American labels and like European labels, with Arrow in the UK distributing some things that might be released by Shout, like in the US. And they have their own features packages and cover arts and packaging styles and all of that. So there's definitely a lot out there.
Yeah, and some companies are known for even just doing a better job of like sort of authoring their discs. I'm not heavy on the technical side of what they do to encode and write these discs and things, but I know that's like I've heard that Arrow does a much better job of actually putting their discs together than say Kino might or something like that. Like you just hear about fewer production errors and glitches and things, and just things just generally might look better from certain labels. Licensing is also different for every region, so you do get into a place where, like now with all these Hong Kong films that just got released are being put out by Shout in the US, Arrow in the UK, and Imprint in Australia. So Australia is kind of the other big player. Imprint and Umbrella operate out of there. So sometimes you do get in this place where like, well, which one should I get? So, but all the labels, it's a good time. It's a great time to be a collector because there's a lot of great labels putting out lots of great stuff, and they're really diving deep to find stuff that just, I mean, hasn't seen a new release of any kind in decades, if ever. So some of the ones like Radiance that you hear us talk about out of the UK and Deaf Crocodile in the States really specialize in finding things that all but the most hardcore cinephile have probably not heard of, because these are like Eastern European films or like deep genre films from, France and Italy and Japan and stuff. So that's kind of like, for me, they're not necessarily better, but they're very exciting because they're unearthing stuff that I'm on the hunt for, the stuff I haven't heard of before. But of course, Criterion, I mean, they're able to land some amazing titles, and they still do put out great releases, of course.
Yeah, they've actually even gotten like Netflix deals in the past to release Netflix films, and there are a lot of people kind of coming for their lunch money.
Well, and also just as the sort of, they're sort of the gateway for people to check out some of these other, Criterion was the label that I started collecting, of course, and I was like, I'm just going to get these. But then once you start looking at the stuff that's next to it on the shelf, you're like, oh, this sounds really cool too. I mean, even just for instance, this De Palma movie that's coming out from Radiance, like, you can get De Palma from Criterion, but there's lots of other stuff that other labels are going to pick up that are deeper cuts. So yeah. So they're doing important work of getting people into more interested in this stuff.
Here's a fun question. When you're organizing Criterions, I know you have some like yours in boxes and stuff. Is the way to go alphabetically or by spine number? I just want to see what you think.
I'm a librarian. I have to do it alphabetically. The spine numbers are interesting, but I need to be able to find the movies, and the spines make no sense. They're interesting in terms of seeing like, this is how the label has evolved. I think that's very valuable and it's fun to see. But if I want to find my movies, especially if you've got a lot of them, it needs to be alphabetical.
I have gotten myself into the mess of starting organizing by the spine number and then just never having alphabetized them. So I have many Criterion releases and they're all in numerical order by spine number, which means if I want to find a movie, I have to find it on my list on Letterboxd, find out what the spine number is, and then go find it on my shelf, unless I know what the spine looks like. So it is extremely counterintuitive, but
it's a lot.
It would take so long for me to alphabetize them the way they should.
Well, thank you, Thom. And I am seeing a movie with Thom here in Seattle. He's going to be stateside and in Seattle on Friday, and so I'm very excited about that. So we'll have more to say next time. And also next time, Josh, you have to make a pick. So what are we going to be watching next?
All right. Speaking of boutique labels putting out unheard of genre films, my next pick, released on Blu-ray from 88 Films, is The Cat from 1992. This got a pretty hefty Blu-ray treatment from 88 Films in the UK. This synopsis here from Lam Nai Choi, who made unhinged masterpieces The Seventh Curse, and Ricky O, The Story of Ricky, comes a film that somehow manages to be even madder. What looks to be like an evil blob thing maybe takes over a cat, and so I'm very interested to see what this is all about on our next episode.
Excellent. I don't This is not one that I have, but I've seen that release, and I will be renting it from Scarecrow so we can watch. I have seen The Seventh Curse, which is really awesome, so I'm excited to check this out. The Seventh Curse is bonkers, so I can only imagine what's waiting in the cat.
Super excited to check this out. And the limited edition that I have from 88 Films does have several commentaries, a separate Japanese cut, some interviews, and a 40-page book. So I will be diving into all of that before our next episode. That being said, if you want to reach out to us, just like our friend Thom did, send us a message about The Wiz, any of our past episodes, or any physical media thoughts and questions that you might have, you can email us at blindbuyspod@gmail.com. And next week, we will be discussing 1992's The Cat. We will see you then.
Bye, everybody.